Today on Do You Even Chopper Podcast, Episode 7, we feature Jimmy Dean Horn. Jimmy Dean Horn is an artist, an illustrator, a designer who is best known as a designer of several issues of Dice magazine, and in the last several years has really concentrated his art on exploring his indigenous heritage. He's featured in issue 17 of The Ton, which you can find at thetonmag.com. Hey Jimmy, how's it going?
I'm pretty good. Yourself, Tim? How you doing?
Pretty good. How are you getting settled in? You moved to New Mexico from LA recently. How's that treating you?
Not too bad. We definitely hit the ground running when we got out here. We had a pretty good little community already built in. So the second we landed, pretty much just reached out to everybody. Was like, "We're here. What's the news? Let's do stuff."
Had you been going out there like periodically to do work and everything prior to that, or was it kind of a this is where we're going, we know a few people type situation?
We've been, well, my wife's tried to get me to move out here. Sorry, my dog just walked in, for like 10 years or so.
Oh, wow.
Pretty much like we did a road trip from New York to Los Angeles and stopped in Santa Fe and Taos, and she was like, "Let's just stop the road trip." And I was still like, not ready to slow down. I was still on that New York speed. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
But after 7 years in LA, I was like, all right, it's time. Let's get out of here. And I've been coming out to Santa Fe with her, after that road trip pretty consistently. I've been doing the Indian market out here every August for the past few years.
Okay.
I showed over at Mokina, the Contemporary Native Design Museum at IAIA. I've got my stuff in a couple galleries out here as well. So it's kind of like made sense to make the move here versus, back to New York or Austin or any other big city.
Are you back up on the hill, or are you down in the basin, or?
We're about like 5 minutes from the plaza. So we're like,
okay.
We're right. Yeah.
Right on. Let's talk about New York. That was kind of like where it all started for you as far as motorcycles.
Oh, for sure.
What brought you to New York originally?
College.
Yeah.
Trying to get, that promised education and, a good life there on out.
Yeah.
I did the college route. And while there, finally having like some actual freedom and some real money, I decided to finally buy a motorcycle. I'd always wanted a motorcycle. I mean, grew up in Austin and grew up riding horses and stuff. So kind of motorcycles was a natural progression, something a little faster.
What years did you move to New York?
06, August 06. Yeah. I was there for a little over a decade.
So you moved there right after I left, basically. Well, did you move for NYU or what school?
Pratt Institute.
Pratt?
I went there for the design program.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it well. I went to Columbia and NYU. That's why I was in New York. So.
Oh, hell yeah. And beautiful campuses.
Yeah. Beautiful campuses, a lot of money.
Yeah.
To go there. I definitely had like that imposter syndrome, being part native kid who I didn't even have to apply to NYU. I was asked by a professor there who knew my cousin, and because he was the head of the American Indian House in New York, if you were ever aware of that institution, and knew Harriet Sky, who was like a mentor of mine. And so I packed up my belongings and was like, I'm going to the big city, going to New York, and found myself like right away working at CBGB's and living there, got married, and then left. So, I mean, understand the hustle when you say, you still were in that fast-paced kind of hustle zone, but you were there for the transformation of New York to like the really gentrified area. How were you able to maintain doing bikes and everything with all the space, the rent and the expenses as they were kind of escalating so quickly during that time?
Oh, they fucking were. I got pretty lucky. I had an apartment in Bushwick that the owner, she loved me. I would like fix stuff. So she didn't raise my rent for the 6 years that I was there. I had a little carport so I could park a bike there. That was kind of where I'd park my daily rider. And then I met up with a good group of guys in South Brooklyn. They had a garage called Machina or Mahina, depending on who you ask for the pronunciation. And that was like, I want to say it was 250 for a space, but I like snuck two bikes into, like, they gave us, 3.5 feet by 8 foot, and you could wheel whatever you want in that space.
Mm.
So I kind of took advantage of that for a little bit. And then I got a little too big for my britches at one point. I got a garage, like my own personal garage in Bushwick, walking distance from my space. Got a Super Beetle. I put that in there. Had a deal with the landlord that he was going to wire it and it was already wired. He just had to connect the electricity. But by the time I needed electricity and power to do the rest of the work, he was MIA. So that project kind of died out. And then when I went back to Machina, their prices had jumped a little bit. And I ended up getting two proper spaces and I could fit a little more motorcycles in there. I got rid of the Super Beetle, unfortunately. Uh, but yeah, I pretty much was at Machina in South Brooklyn for a majority of my time. I was in Snake Pit for, the last 5 months of it being around. They kind of didn't give me all the info with the landlord there.
Oh yeah.
But,
Tell him told his
whatever.
time.
Yep, exactly. Fuck landlords. They're always going to screw you over.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Let's talk about like you had kind of a kind of a rapid transition from like, you know, ratty early bike to Ironhead, right? And then from Ironhead to um, what would be kind of people would think of like the more expensive bikes now. How'd
oh,
that
yeah.
kind of go for you?
Well, the first bike I got was a little CL 350 71. I got it from some dude in East Connecticut. I mean, I didn't know anything at this point, and it was all I could afford. I get out there. This dude showed it to me in a tank top, board shorts, flip flops, and sunglasses on the back of his head. Should have been a red flag right there, but I was too excited. He kicked the bike over and immediately took it off down the street, brought it back, and then turned the bike off. And again, if I knew more at that time, would have been like, all right, didn't let it idle, didn't let it run, didn't let me do anything with it.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of a red flag. So I like cut my teeth on that bike. I mean, I remember the first weekend bringing it back, knowing nothing at all at Machina, just like staring at the bike, like, I don't fucking know. What did I do? I just dropped all my money into this thing. And then there was like a really good community there. They all kind of came together. They helped me out. They showed me what was wrong with it. They taught me the basics. Phil over there taught me the basics of wiring. Um, Yuvan and Matt over there taught me like carb cleaning and maintenance and that kind of stuff. So like everybody, and like Henry would help me out with any truing of tires or any like wheel related stuff. He owned a bicycle shop. And like through them, I kind of got the confidence, to keep going, keep pushing, get another bike. I ended up getting a moped for a little bit. That was just, for shits and giggles. And then it just kind of like, the bug just kind of eats you. It gets you, and then you just can't stop thinking about it. So I ended up on Craigslist for a while, just looking around, and I found a VTR 250 that was like chained up to the side of some photographer's studio for, at this point, it had been 5 years, and
Oh
it
wow.
had weathered some crazy storms. That big winter storm that shut the city down, it was
Yeah.
chained to the wall for that. The tornado that came through and flooded the city, it was chained to the wall for that. So I got it back to the garage, put a new battery in it, changed the oil, put gas in it, new spark plugs. That thing started right up. So then I was feeling pretty good about myself, and I was like, okay, got a little bit more cash because I had the ad job at that time. So I ended up getting the Ironhead, as you were saying. That was from some old HA dude in South Brooklyn. He came over, definitely did not want to get rid of the bike, but he was kind of hitting some hard times and needed the
Yeah.
cash. But we hung out in the garage for probably 2 hours drinking beers of him just telling me stories of that bike. And in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna chop this dude's bike.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Kind of feeling a
Which is
little
always
bad
like
about
that
it.
awkward feeling of like,
Yeah, I'm
Good
gonna fuck
story,
this.
man. I'm gonna
Yeah,
totally fuck it up.
I'm glad you love it because it's gone once you leave. I
Yeah.
ended up not chopping it just because I had a couple other people that were like, "Oh, it's super rare, man. It was a kick only 79. I guess there was only like 200 of them made or something." And I don't know. I was like, okay, fine. Also, like needing an excuse to not get in over my head. I was like,
Yeah.
all right, I'll take the bike apart, but I won't chop it. I powder coated the frame, redid the motor, redid the transmission on that thing. That was a fucking nightmare. Uh, Painted all the tins in my Brooklyn apartment. I had like a little tiny 5 foot by 8 foot room. It was technically a bedroom. So I just like lined it with plastic and hung everything up in there, opened the window, put a box fan in the window, and just started spray painting in the spare room. And then yeah, after that bike came out, I had a photographer friend that wanted to photograph it. Um, Ended up on Silladrome, that blog.
Yeah.
Felt pretty
This
good
is during
about
the
that.
blog era for people who are listening, like who know choppers from Instagram stuff. Before Instagram, the
Yeah,
chopper community was heavy into Blogspot and the blogs. I mean,
you could probably still dig that my old blog up because I kind of had a build blog for that old Iron Head. I don't think I ever deleted it. Who knows if Blogspot does?
yeah, I don't
Uh,
know.
yeah. And then from there, I got a Sportster, and rather than going the chopper route, I went the cafe route with it. I was still kind of a little green, I guess. I think cafe racers are, I may get some hate on this one, but tend to be the greener people, I think. Maybe
I
not.
mean, it's a totally different mentality, though. I mean, at the
Yeah.
end of the day, and they make a lot of sense in a urban setting like New York.
Well, the way I
It,
built it, it didn't.
it didn't the way you built it. You fucked it up for yourself.
Oh, I look like Superman on that thing. I mean, I had the way back rear sets, the low clip-ons. I was like lying down on it. It was fun
Yeah,
on the
but then
highway,
you're
but
putting all your weight in a spot that makes it easier to turn to get away from, you know, the buses merging into you and all
yeah.
the other nightmares of riding in Manhattan.
Oh, and there were plenty. Yeah. And then after that bike, I sold that. And my buddy Nick Toscano out in New Jersey, we'd went on a ride. Actually, I had a Triumph at this point too. Kind of forget about all the British stuff. But I was the Triumph was kind of my daily rider, and Nick, me, Matt, Diego, a bunch of other like New York dudes would go on this like trip out to Rhodes Cafe. We'd leave Brooklyn at like 7 in the morning, get there for brunch, have a couple drinks, ride back home. And on one of the rides, Nick had just picked up this 78 shovelhead barn find, and it was just the ugliest, but the perfect amount of ugly. So it came back for full circle. So you're like, I like that. I don't know why, but it looks just right. So wrong, just right. And we were having some Bloody Marys, and I was like, "Yo, Nick, I want your bike. Are you selling it?" And he said, "No fucking way." I was like, "Okay, fair. When you're ready, let me know." And a year and a half later or so, he reached out and he was like, "I'm ready to let it go." And I sold the Triumph that weekend, got the cash, and bought the shovel head. And that was my bike for. I mean, it's still my bike. It's outside right now. That was the daily rider in New York for the rest of the time out there.
Yeah. So
Out
this
in
whole
LA.
time you're doing this, which I assume occupies an obscene amount of time,
Oh yeah,
and the New York hustle is you have to actually work pretty hard too to afford to live there.
one
What
hundred
were you
percent.
doing for work, and how were you able to kind of balance like the actual time of having to live there and then build bikes there as well?
Well, I didn't balance it well because it ruined a relationship, which worked out well because I'm happily married now to someone else. Um, I was in the ad agencies basically. So I was at Ogilvy for a little while, some small agencies. Tipping Gardner was one, Demetrius two was another, and then I went to Digitas. I was there for a while. So basically, just ad money,
Mm.
really doing a soulless job. But I got to do design stuff, which was nice, and they would let me illustrate every now and again. I got to do some fun projects. Eventually, I kind of hit a brick wall there. I realized that there was no upward momentum for anybody who was already working there. They kept hiring from the outside, and
Oh, I see.
yeah, I helped win the Harley account at one point, actually at the end. And when we won it, they sent it to Boston, and then the Boston
Oh,
office almost immediately lost it. And when I heard about that, I was just like, "Fuck this!" And I was dating Marcine, who I'm married to now. I just told her, I was like, "Yo, I'm ready to get the fuck out of here." So that's why we moved. We both
yeah.
agreed that New York was we were done with it.
And so your destination in mind at the time was LA, or did you kind of settle on
Well,
LA after thinking about
for
other
the
places, or
for like the ad life, it really was like New York, LA at the time, Miami a little bit, but I don't think I would jive with Miami. I've been told the seedy underside I would, but the the normal day to day operations, the food I would also enjoy, really good Cuban food. But other than that, wouldn't. So Miami was off the table. Austin hadn't really picked up for ad stuff at that
yeah,
moment. It was still pretty small. So I kind of figured I'd go to LA and you know continue doing the ad thing, even though it's what drove me out of New York.
yeah. What
Um,
was that like? Like, talk about what it was like, kind of arriving in LA. You have your shovel head still with you. You're kind of getting started. How did you find a community there, and how did you kind of get planted in LA for better part of a decade?
for sure. At that point, I had two shovel heads. I had the Daily Rider from Nick, and then the Project shovel that I had started. It was like a chop long bike. I had a Dick Allen. I got it right here. It's like a 10 over Dick Allen front end. It's ridiculous. Um, but I had some people that I knew in New York that had moved out. My buddy Jason, he had moved out and kind of paved the way. And he's like, "Yeah, dude, it's tight out here. Come on out." And I had some friends in New York that were from LA that spoke highly of it. Usually, it gets a pretty bad rap from anyone not there. So I was like, fuck it, we'll give it a go. Some sunshine would be nice. I can still do what I do. My wife paints big walls, so she needs big walls to be around.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many big mural projects in LA. I mean, that's
Oh yeah,
crazy work there.
it's nuts. Landing in LA was pretty cool. I mean, we got lucky. We got a spot in Laurel Canyon. We had a friend who was Airbnb in a bunch of places up there, and one of the landlords found out and got mad, and he was like, "I gotta find a tenant to move in." So we kind of just swooped right in, got that spot. It was cheaper than the rent was cheaper than New York. We had a little tiny yard. I mean, the house was small. It was like a
Yeah.
250 square foot space, but because of how cheap it was, I was able to get a pretty sizable garage with my buddy Jason, and we kind of just went from there, built the community. I didn't really have too much out there. My wife did because they, the companies that she worked for also paint out there. So she already knew a bunch of folks. So that helped out quite a bit, um, meeting new people.
What was the scene like there when you were starting and kind of dipping your toes into it? And not to bury the lead, but eventually you found yourself working for Dice and kind of being part of like the, in quotes, like scene there. So
Yeah.
as a newcomer who also is coming from New York, and I don't know, some people might not realize is there's a weirdness about people who are moving to New York at that period, moving from New York to LA because there's a ton of them, and
Yeah.
somewhat of a resentment in that regard. Like, what was all that kind of like for you?
Well, I think there's always a resentment of newcomers pretty much anywhere. And it's definitely just, getting stronger as the years go by. The motorcycle scene, I mean, I loved it in New York. It was really nice. It wasn't about like taking photos and meeting up like at places to be seen. We would do like in New York, we would ride to like a bar and like have drinks and park all of our bikes out front and then, go wherever after. But there was just something to look at me, I think. in LA for me to really fully embrace it. And like you did, like I did get into Dice Magazine and into like that chopper scene, but I was still, even when I was in it, I was kind of in the back seat. I was in the back seat. I was behind the scenes. I'd show up to some of the events every now and again. I'm not big on group rides, more than 5 or 6 people, and I kind of want to know the people. I've seen people go down just from hot dogging too much, or that guy trying to take photos and he's looking behind and ends up driving off the road, and it's just like I don't want to be involved in that. I don't care if you take a picture of me riding or not.
Yeah.
I just want to, I came from like skateboarding too, where it's a very solitary kind of, you go out and it's just, you do your thing, you enjoy it, and then you go home. And maybe you bring one dude out or 2 or 3 skaters with you, grab a 40, sit down, chat, hang out. And then, before you know it, 8 hours is over and you're like, shit, I got
Yeah.
stuff to do.
I think that checks off the bingo slot for come from skateboarding background for this podcast, because I think it's just a really common thing now for
Yeah.
people to have that background going into choppers. There's something that, and maybe this is like real out there projecting, but like the solitary and like the kind of just not trusting like sketchy situations and that, and this is like I said, probably getting out there, but both of us are passing native, um, who probably have heard awful things said about our cultures by people that we thought were friends and everything. And
Yep.
I think that for me, it's always bred a bit of like solitary kind of mindset in and of itself. There's
Mm-hmm.
also that like balance of like imposter syndrome and then also not giving a fuck about people too. And I wonder how that plays into it for you, for like kind of keeping a distance and kind of um keeping yourselves at arm's length from some of that kind of stuff. Because for me, when I think about it, it really probably does. I mean, not very many friends of mine who are not native know what it's like to be on a res um or anything like that. And people listen to this might not understand what I'm trying to get at with you, but I think you probably do, and maybe we can tease that out a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, well, I never grew up on a res. I grew up in a military family, so the second res, as it were, military
Yeah,
base.
no shit.
Yeah, my mom was a captain in the Air Force. She was a nurse captain. My dad was a tank driver in the Army. I don't know the proper term for it. He's not going to be happy if he hears this, that I don't know his actual
His
rank.
MO is, yeah.
Yeah. And my stepdad was also in the Air Force. He was a doctor. So we'll let people, do the math on that one. But because of the military, because of like how much I moved around growing up, I mean, the longest I was in one school was actually college. 4 years straight was
Yeah.
college.
What's your school
Every
tally?
other,
What's your school tally before college? I think mine
uh,
was 9.
damn, that's, yeah, 2 elementary, 2 middle school, 2 high school. So
6?
just
That's
six.
still, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a
it's
brutal.
up there.
Yeah.
Yep. Every new school, there was like room. I just also wasn't like, I'm still not the most friendly person. I try to be. I'm trying to be better, and that sucks. Like trying to sell art too, where you're like, don't give a fuck to talk to people most of the time. But like when I would show up at schools, I would be, a little reserved, a little bit like standoffish, kind of be in the background for the first couple weeks, months almost. And there would just be rumors all the time. There was one school, there was a rumor that I'd killed someone, and that's why I was at this school. So it was just like stuff like that also would make it hard. So skateboarding became a thing. When I ended up in high school, I was just like, I ended up hanging out with all the skateboarders and smoking weed and hanging out behind vans in the parking lot. And just like every transition kind of found myself further and further from, the main group of people. So I don't know. It's the motorcycle, riding the motorcycle solitary. It's just, I think it's just been with me forever.
Yeah.
That I like. I mean, even growing up in Texas, I would ride horses, and that's kind of, you could be with a group of people, but even that, you're still fairly solitary.
Yeah.
You can see someone, 20 yards ahead of you, 20 yards behind you, but you're not having conversations most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's also like that physical connection to a horse too that you have to kind of concentrate on in a way that
Mm-hmm.
if you're paying attention too much to other things, you're gonna,
Get tossed.
get kicked off, get tossed.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to think through and is like the like unconscious kind of walls that people put up based on like their experience sometimes
Mm-hmm.
and comfort zones. And I'm the same. I don't like group rides.
Yeah.
And I don't like rides with like even a ton of friends. If it's like too big, it's just not fun for me.
For sure.
And then even like if you're riding and you're going to bars and stuff, after a while I'm gonna just peace out because I just am like fuck this. But that's
Oh,
just my
100%.
personality. But
Yeah.
I think it has stemmed from a lot of times just from the like a childhood of always being kind of an outsider in a situation.
100%. I
And
would
that's
always like find one or two people that I would feel connected to, like LA with a lot of the riding I would do. I would hit my buddy Chase up if I wanted to ride with somebody. And if we went to the bar, we would go we'd get to this one bar at 5 p.m. because between 5 and 7, they had free pool.
yeah,
So we would get there, we would get a beer, maybe two, and just play pool. If the table was open, it usually was. Play for 2 hours or until we got booted from the table. And then we would, fuck off. We'd go our separate ways. And literally, I'd go left and he'd go right.
yeah.
Like,
Um, I guess, since it's a chopper podcast, people probably want to know about the knucklehead and stuff too.
yeah,
But I think it's fascinating to talk about some other stuff. So let's talk about your other bikes in the interest of time, and then we could talk about some other stuff too.
for sure. Yeah. So the knuckle that's a long time coming for that bike. So when we moved from New York to LA, I brought the two shovel heads out. The chopped shovel with the Dick Allen front end ended up getting a shorter Springer, and then it ended up getting a 35 millimeter. And then I ended up selling the motor to my buddy who wanted it. And I got around the same time, I got a flathead built by Nick Toscano. The hopes were to race it in Trog out in Pismo Beach. But they never did it again. Like I literally got the bike and then the dudes were like, no more Trog. So I was like, all right, shit, I'm not going to fucking drive out to the East Coast to race a motorcycle on the sand. So I kind of like putted around town on it for a little while, kind of trying to figure out what to do with it. And a dude up in NorCal hit me up and wanted to do a trade. He had a knucklehead motor, transmission, and frame, and he wanted the flathead. And I was like, all right, fucking straight trade. I gave him the little 750 flatty. He gave me a knucklehead. And I got back. I ended up selling the frame. It was a little dinged up, and I had the shovel head frame with no motor in it
Yeah,
already. So I was like, okay, tossed the knuckle in there, put the little spacer in there, so it it works. And then boom, it became a knucklehead chopper overnight. A little bit of, I had a couple tweaks for that. So it had, I put the Springer back on it. Didn't really enjoy it. Ended up getting a 4-over Sportster front end. It was like a mid 90s or whatever, nothing
yeah,
fancy. Then I ended up, going a little too hard one afternoon on it and hit a road groove that the city had just carved out in the road. And it dented the front wheel. It tacoed the rear wheel. It snapped my sissy bar. I didn't find any frame damage. It's been painted. I had Walt Woodson paint it up in North Hollywood. So he did a pretty good job. I haven't seen any cracks yet, and it doesn't feel like there's any cracks. So after that, I put some mag wheels on it just to really piss people off. It's got dual disc on the front, disc on the back. It is not,
yeah. It looks like a
uh,
modern like tough guy bike, but with a knucklehead in it.
hell yeah, appreciate that. That was
Yeah.
kind of where I was headed. It was just like working at Dice. I got to see all the bikes, just like you. You get to see so many bikes and
Yeah.
just so much talent, so much creativity, just different ways to solve the exact same problem. And I kind of dig that tough guy chopper aesthetic. And I already had a chopper, and I was just like, fuck it, let me just make
Yeah.
this that. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
I don't need it to be an Evo chopper tough guy. Like,
Was this
just
was
do
this
it.
built around the same time you were doing Locked and Lodi? Because I think the first time I met you, you pawned a sticker off on me at a bike show to for Locked and Lodi,
Yeah,
like
you still
before
owe
you
me
did it.
$5 for that sticker, by the way.
Huh?
You still owe me five
Oh, do
dollars.
I?
No, I'm fucking with you. The I got the shovel. I did the shovel knuckle swap. Yeah, no, I did have it at that point. I didn't want to bring my bikes to the show. I did
Yeah.
have it in town, but I felt gross, I guess, being like, I've made the show and look at my bike.
Yeah, it's
Like,
always a weird, hard
all
one.
this.
Like, I totally get it. I mean, I've brought my bikes to a few of our shows, but not all of them.
Yeah.
And because it's a weird, like, it's a weird deal. You want someone to see it
Mm-hmm.
because you spent like time and money. And in the case of the Triumph, Jimmy did this amazing like copper fab work and all this stuff on it. So I want people to see it for him, but then it's like you're also putting on the show. Like that's a weird one. I wonder how other people kind of handle it because I always kind of grapple with that one when I think
Yeah.
about it.
I get in
I
my
think
own
you're on
way
the right
all the
tip,
time.
actually.
I appreciate you. I get in my own way all the time with this kind of stuff because it's the same with art. I would do art shows and like help organize some of those things. And it's like, do I bring my stuff? Do I like and if I do, where do I put it in the show? Because
Yeah,
you feel dirty when you walk in the front door to the show that you've curated, and the first thing you see
yeah,
is me. I don't.
yeah.
I feel dirty. A lot of people don't, and this is one of the reasons I left LA because a lot of people don't feel dirty doing that. And I don't know. I never jived with that. So
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I think when I was doing more shows I went to film school, by the way. So like, and I did photography also and worked for some places that people have heard of. But when I would put stuff up in shows like and it was friends and we were doing it, it was always like the how do you do this? And I read the Ethical Guide to Pricing book that like um yeah.
yep,
And like I was like, okay, I'm gonna use this to kind of base some of my decisions on and how to kind of make money and monetize this because I think without that, even going to fancy schools that are supposed to teach you about this, like they really teach you how to make connections and hustle better than like kind of
yeah. Pratt
how to
was really
stick to
good
kind
for
of a
networking.
moral kind of compass.
Yep.
That's hilarious that you have it sitting right there.
Well, I just did some illustration work. I think I can say it now. For Shabuzi. I met him out in LA. My buddy, I guess I can call him my buddy, Will. We're always at heads, but he's a good guy. He helped Shabuzi build his tough guy Evo
Yeah,
chopper bike, and hooked me up with him. I did a T-shirt for him 5 years ago or so, and then he hit me up. Shabuzi did about a month or two ago to do some work on his new album, some merch related stuff. And I had to pull that book out to be like, I don't know what to charge for like a
yeah,
real famous dude.
yeah. Yeah, because you don't want to like at one point you want it to be fair based on like what your means are, but
Yep.
you also don't want it to be one of those like it's for exposure scams,
Yeah.
which is like in any kind of art form, whether it's print or photo or you're a sculptor, painter, even in
Mhm.
bands. I toured from when I was a teenager until COVID, and like people would say, "Oh, it's good exposure." It's like, no, I want good money for the time and
Yeah, let
effort
me
and all
tell my
that.
landlord about all this good exposure I got.
Yeah.
See if that'll fucking pay the bill.
But then it's like the punk rock in me is like things shouldn't cost as much as they do in
Oh,
some ways.
100%.
So it's like
I
a
mean, I still do homie deals with like friends and like that museum show that I was talking about earlier that I had in Santa Fe. That came from giving artwork away.
yeah.
I had a buddy from LA that was kind of helping me out at Indian Market. Um, and he was just watching. My wife was there helping me out too. But Danny was watching me sell my work. Sorry, let me just shut this door. Just watching TV out there.
Oh, that's cool.
Um, he was watching me sell my work, and this cat came up and he just started talking to me about printmaking and my work and kind of my background and all this kind of stuff. And we ended up chatting for 30, 40 minutes at this market. And he looked at one of the prints and he's like, oh, I really like that one. Like, it speaks to me. And I was like, dog, it's yours. Like, take it. And he said no. And I was like, take it. It's yours. It was like a little small print. And he was like, okay, thanks. He was super appreciative. He left and he came back an hour or so later and was like, hey, I'm Eddie. I work right there. I'm going to talk to you later. And I was like, all right, cool. Like, whatever. And then he talked to me later. He's like, I want to get you in the museum. Like, let's make this happen. And, that like that punk rock mentality or just like the anti-capitalist idea of, I mean, just art in general. And I kind of felt like Choppers had some of that. That's not always the case with a lot of people, but that's one of the reasons that the Chopper scene kind of sucked me in, or Choppers in general. But like, just you give good vibes out, good vibes will come back.
Yeah,
And it's not
totally.
always about getting paid.
I think people think that like there's money to be made sometimes, and so they go into it to make money. And I'm the first to tell people like with what we do, like first of all, print media doesn't make money unless you're doing side hustle stuff. And
For
second
real.
of all, like our shows are either free or at the lowest price to where I break even. So
Yeah.
like I don't really need this business in quotes. Like I have a real kind of career. So everything's done to kind of just bring community together and do
Yeah.
everything. And that's kind of my philosophy on it. But on the other hand, I see people who like get greedy quick, like yeah, with we could talk offline about greedy quick.
I did name drop a couple people, but I won't. I'll be good. I'll be good.
But
But like that
that's the way it
was,
is.
yeah, that was the thought with the Lodi show, the Locked in Lodi show too, was like, I want people to come. I want it to be big. I want dope bikes to be there. It was choppers, performance Harleys, and custom vans. So
A
kind
lot
of
of
like,
vans.
yeah, a lot of vans. We ended up having probably 50 choppers or so, probably 30 performance bikes, and then 35 or so vans, all out in
And
the town. Just it was a fucking mob scene,
and
but a
flip
free
the
show.
fucking authorities out over it, which is super fascinating that like they freaked out over it instead of thinking about economic development kind of opportunities. And the difference in towns is interesting. So like you do Locked and Lodi, they say never again. Cops
Yeah,
say basically run you out of town. We do a similar show here and they're like, please come back next year. Do you need money to do it?
yeah,
And it's just the, difference of mentality of how people see each other. And maybe in that part of, it's close to Central Valley, I guess. They're used to, fuck shit up kind of bike parties that,
yeah, for
but
sure. I mean, AJ has a heavy presence there. I gave a booth to the president of, I believe it was the Stockton chapter. So he had a booth there. He was vending. All of his buddies came out. It was fine. I mean,
yeah,
they're just people,
yeah, no shit. Yeah,
If you piss off anybody, you may get a fist to the mouth. It's like just because they got a vest on doesn't mean anything.
yeah.
Like I might get a little heat for that one. Um, But yeah, the cops definitely they freaked out and they were like, I actually had meetings with the cops beforehand, and they were like, you got to say no colors, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I was like, that's kind of a First Amendment issue, but like, I'll write it on the website, but I'm not going to enforce it. If you want to enforce it, you enforce it.
Yeah.
That's not me. And then come day of the show, they didn't want to enforce it. They asked me to go kick them out. And I walked over to the group and I was like, hey, y'all, they're watching you. I know you know that. They want me to kick you out. I'm not going to kick you out, but they are watching. And what's new? Y'all are in your
Used
club
to it by
attire. Of
now.
course, yeah, like of course any cop nearby is gonna, be giving you the hairy eyeball. And we chatted for a little while, and then I just went back to doing show business. And they ended. I'm pretty sure there was a scuffle at one point, but it was like a local, drugged out kid stole some woman's purse,
Oh,
and some HA dude ended up tripping him, and then someone else took the purse and gave it back, and it's just like it's such a
self
comical
policing.
kind of. But it's like
uh,
all the issues we had in that town were town related.
yeah.
It had nothing to do with anybody that came out. I mean, there was definitely people open containers on the street, but it's a fucking chopper show. There's going to
Yeah.
be open containers. No one was doing burnouts on the street. No one was slamming beers and then jumping on their bike and tearing down. Maybe after the show, but
Yeah.
whatever.
Let's pivot. I mean,
Yeah,
the cops shut that down and they said no more. So at
it
this,
was the cops and some big donors to the
yeah,
town. Yeah.
downtown alliance type people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So at that point, like you're starting to kind of do your fine art more, which maybe talk about how you reconnected with your kind of tribal heritage and fuse that into your fine art, and then like wanted to boogie from LA, because I think that's kind of a period just after that show that you started to see kind of a big
Yeah,
shift.
well, the reconnection with my Chickasaw side, that kind of happened over a very long period of time. I've always known that I had a part Chickasaw, but it's from my dad's side, and my folks got divorced early on,
Yeah.
and I was not a happy kid. I wasn't happy with him. I wasn't happy with the situations I was in. I wasn't happy with moving around, all that stuff. So I pretty much denied everything that came from my pop. Um, there was definitely a lot of like immature parents. Every time I'd hang out with my ma and he came up, she would shit talk him. Every time I'd hang out with my dad, he would shit talk her. And it was just like, that's kind of a weird place to be as a
Yeah.
kid. So I was just like, fuck all this confusion. I'm just a kid. I like to skateboard and I'd like to draw. Like, I'm going to do those things. So that I don't want to say denounced, but just like ignored from elementary school through college. And then my sister ended up passing away from suicide. And I'd at the funeral, I saw my pop again for the first time. And at that point, it had been like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And it was him, and it was my stepma and my two brothers on that side. And I was just like, am I doing myself a disservice right now? I could see a change in him, and I was also missing so much with this anger I had.
Yeah.
I don't want to say misplaced because it was definitely there for a reason, but it was fucking up a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So after that funeral, like we all went out, we got dinner, kind of started to rekindle that relationship, started, seeing my grandma more, started seeing that side of the family a little bit more. Um, and then from there, it was after maybe 4 years of reconnection, he was like, you got to get your tribal card.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right. I didn't want to, because I wasn't doing anything for the Chickasaw Nation. I wasn't doing anything to learn about the Chickasaw Nation
Yeah.
past what I'd already known. But begrudgingly, I was like, all right, if y'all do the heavy lifting, and I mean, it really wasn't heavy lifting. It was filling out a couple forms because like we are part of the nation. So it's literally
Yeah.
just saying, that's my dad. And then they're like, cool, here's your
Yeah, because
second
they
butt.
have a record. I mean, for people who don't know how this works, they have a record of the family all the way up until they started doing their
Right.
version of like
Yeah, exactly.
citizenship. So, like, for example, for me, for Grovon, like, I have the declaration that takes a prisoner, like, which is my great grandma, of when they started doing enrollment for the first time. And then, so then my great grandma and my grandma and everything, and even my mom, they have all their declarations, and so they
Yeah,
have all that information, just like the United States government would have, and so it's pretty easy. You just have to prove that you are you and that your
exactly.
dad is your dad.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, probably the hardest part of it was getting the photo, getting
yeah.
to a CVS and doing the passport photo. That was probably the hardest element of it.
So does your
Uh,
grandma or anyone live in Oklahoma?
my grandma grew up in Oklahoma. She was in a residential school there, and then
Yeah.
ended up going out to Tracy, California.
Okay.
Um, and she's not far from Tracy now. I don't remember what town she's in. I'm a bad grandson, but she's just outside of Tracy now.
Okay.
Yeah, which is like Central California.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And my pop, he grew up a bit in Oklahoma, but because he was a bad kid just like me, and my grandma was like, I'm not going to deal with this. So you're going to go back to Ada and you're going to work on a farm.
mm,
So he spent a lot of his life working on a ranch in Oklahoma. And then he went to college in Nebraska. It was a cornhusker. And then he ended up in a military family, and then in Austin. And
yeah,
now he's out in Lodi.
yeah.
Yeah.
How was that kind of once you kind of completed that process? How'd that feel for you? Because I think the like paperwork of it and everything, at least for me, it was like, oh, okay, well. But then like once you realize like, oh wait, like this is meaningful to my family. And then it also gives you like a weird, different kind of connection. Because I think there's a lot of people in the country who say they're native, but then like, it's their Cherokee great grandma and like not necessarily
Yeah.
native, it's a presumed native. And so what was
Yeah. Their
that like
grandma
for
told
you?
them that they had a
Yeah.
Cherokee princess in their family or some shit. Honestly, when I got it done, I did feel a bit like an imposter
Yeah, I
because
can
I
see
had
that.
denied it for so long. And I just kind of had the card and kind of just sat with it. I didn't really tell anyone outside the family that I had done it because I had heard, a bunch of terrible things from people that I thought were friends and people
Yeah.
that I
That's
was,
the most fucked up thing about being passing, I think,
it's
is
nuts.
it's
One of the
crazy.
first art shows I did related to like indigenous artwork. And it's like, this is an indigenous art fair that this happened at. Some white woman walks up to me and she says, "So you're Indian?" And I was like, yeah, I'm from the Chickasaw Nation. They're in Oklahoma. They were initially in like Mississippi, Alabama area, and Andrew Jackson decided to move them. And then she cut me off before I could finish any of that. And she said, I thought we killed all you.
Oh,
Yep. And I was
wow.
like, okay, all right. And I just turned my focus. I was like, I can't deal with this right now. Like, I'm gonna slap this woman. So I turned and talked to someone else.
It's just insane. But
Yeah,
I mean, it's too common,
too
unfortunately.
common. Yeah. So because, and that was like after the fact, but I'd heard stuff like that worse,
Yeah.
not as bad, but still, you shouldn't be saying, uh, throughout my whole life.
Oh
So I
yeah.
had kind of just, I put the card in my wallet and was like, okay, like that's that. And then maybe the next time I went out to visit my pop, he'd kind of asked like, so like, how's it feel? What are you doing? Anything? And like, I didn't have a good answer. I was like, no, I just have the card. Like I haven't done anything. And then my grandma came over and we kind of had a talk, and I was like, okay, I need to do some work.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have this card in my back pocket and do nothing with it, and do nothing for the nation, do nothing for, society or anything as a greater whole, or myself mentally to figure out, who I am, what's missing here, and just like go through life like that. But that, didn't sound like a great way to do it, especially since I was on the path of reconnecting with that side of the family
Yeah.
and being told you're not doing it. You're showing up, but you're keeping quiet in the back of the room. Like, are you really doing anything? So I kind of had a shift at that moment, and started doing some research, started like learning a little bit more. I had a fairly good knowledge of like what had happened.
Yeah.
Not the greatest, but the like the bird's eye view of what had happened to indigenous people throughout this country and the Chickasaw Nation specifically. But I didn't know enough, so
Yeah.
I just started, doing research here and there, a little bit more. I'd buy a book, I'd read it. I'd get a book about Chickasaw artists, and I'd look through it. I'd buy a book about, the Navajo Nation and what's happening out there, and just like I just started shifting where I was receiving content and what I was
Yeah.
looking at, who I was reading, what I was consuming, basically. And that was all prior to Dice, prior to LA. That happened in New York. Um, and by the time I was like halfway through my stint at Dice, at that point I had really been like, okay, I feel comfortable enough with my knowledge, with myself, to come out and be like, I'm part of the Chickasaw Nation. I'm Native American, and I know this, that, and the other. I can speak about tons of things that have happened in the past. I'm starting to learn the language.
Yeah, I was
I'm
gonna ask,
doing
did you start? I mean, that's the beautiful thing about Chickasaw is that the language is well preserved compared to a number of other tribes. So,
for sure. It's
how is
still
your language studies going on that?
they're going. It's slow. I wish I could have focused more time
Mm,
towards that. I know some phrases, I know some words, but I definitely don't know as much as I should. My grandma gave me a Rosetta Stone
oh yeah.
DVD, and she was like, "Here you go, learn the language." I don't have a DVD player, um, and I told her that the next time I saw, her, I was like, "I don't have a fucking DVD player, Grandma. Like, how do I?" I mean, lazy. I could have gone to a fucking pawn shop and picked one up. But she was like, "Here you go. Here's mine. No more excuses." So I popped that in, started to learn it a little bit, and like through my art, I know a bunch of Chickasaw artists. I know a bunch of Choctaw artists, Muskogee artists, and like we talk, and I try and use the language where I can when we're hanging out. If I'm in Oklahoma, Chokma, Halito, let people know, hello, how you doing? Halito used to be a Chickasaw word for hello. It's now just um, Choctaw, which is, funny because it is such an old language,
hmm
but it's still growing and evolving, and we're
Yeah,
all
and that's that
still,
forced closeness due to relocation too.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah. So my website is halito.com. And then almost 6 months after getting that URL, the nations decided that, because it used to be Halito was a northern speaker, a northern Chickasaw speaker, and Chokma was a southern speaker. And now they were like, nope, that's Choctaw. Chokma is Chickasaw. So I was like, oh well, I'm gonna keep that URL for now. It's kind of fun.
So at what point did you kind of decide to, you know, bail on LA, kind of relocate and really focus pretty exclusively on your fine art?
I had lost my love for LA pretty early on. I mean, we were there for 7.5 years about.
Mm.
And that first year we were up in Laurel Canyon, and I loved it there. I don't know if anyone listening is familiar with Laurel Canyon. It's like where all the big artists would be, and like musicianal artists for the most
Mhm.
part. Especially in the 60s and 70s, it was just like you could just hear music through the canyon. Not that I was alive, I've read books, and that's what they said. I'm going to believe it.
Yeah.
So I loved being in Laurel Canyon because it had this like this soul that you could just feel when you were there. And I mean, every morning was magical. I'd make a pot of coffee. I'd sit out on my porch. I'd watch the fog rise off the hill. I'd watch wildlife walk around, and then if we wanted, we would go down. We'd walk over to Chateau Marmont. That was the closest bar we had. We'd walk down the Hollywood Strip. We'd walk over the Rainbow, and it was like, this is fucking sick. Like, I get why people like LA. And then I made the mistake of rebuilding the stairs that led to the house that we stayed at. And then the owners were like, this is the last thing we needed to sell this place. So
Oh.
they put it up on the market almost immediately after finishing the steps.
Yeah.
And then we ended up in Frogtown on the other side of LA. It's like by Dodger Stadium.
Yeah.
Not really East LA, but it's like the east side of LA. And I mean, I liked the area. I loved the Frogtown neighborhood. I loved the neighbors I had there, the community that I had like immediately. But that community was very removed from like my art world for the most. There were a couple people that were artists over there that I like connected with. Frogtown has a pretty big art scene. Um, so I did connect with some of those folks. And then, there's Rick's. If anyone's in LA, go to Rick's. Fucking best burger spot. Say hi to Elizabeth for me. Um, but like I kept my circle pretty tight when we moved to Frogtown. I like the city kind of just became a 2 mile radius for me.
Yeah.
And if I'm not going more than 2 miles, I won't ride the motorcycle because I think it's silly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't even like warm up. So I like ended up doing a lot of walking and riding bicycles and skateboarding around. And then the chopper scene, just I never really connected with it out there. So I kind of felt I won't say secondary to it, but I didn't feel connected to it is really
Yeah.
the way to say it.
You were there, but
So
you felt like you weren't part of it, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. I wasn't cool enough. I didn't take enough photos. I didn't wear, enough fucking ripped pants and old t-shirts and whatever. Um, so I like that didn't keep me like New York when I moved. I was like, fuck, I'm gonna miss these chopper dudes. I'm gonna miss all the people that I ride motorcycles with out here. I'm gonna miss that garage. But LA, I just never, had that. So I would like, for me, I was Marcy could have been like, let's fucking get out of here right now. And I would have said yes. But she works on big walls and I was still trying to get, I was working with Dice at the time and that was like based out of Trico. So I was still kind of connected to the ground there, I guess. But then Dean moved, and then Dice became a remote thing for me. And at that point, Marcy had, excelled and became one of the top ad mural painters in her field. She's a glass ceiling breaker. She's the first woman sign painter
oh well, yeah.
in the modern day ad painting. Yeah.
I've seen the
And,
work, that's
oh,
been
dude,
posted, and it's just sick. I mean,
it's unreal.
um,
She'll do one of those walls with like one other person in 5 days.
it's insane. And so for
Yeah.
people who are listening to understand, like these, when we talk about walls, you're talking about 6-story full broadside walls, typically in LA. And
Yeah.
people who've been to Hollywood or um, Burbank, those kind of more industry areas, you'll know what we're talking about.
Yeah. And a 6-story wall, that's a small one for her too.
Yeah, well,
Like
I'm just
she
guesstimating.
Yeah, the stuff she does is wild. But yeah, she got to a point where it's like those companies will fly you out. So now we're not, and like I do art, I do work remote, I do design and illustration work remote.
Yeah,
So we don't need to be in this expensive ass city in this house that's not built right, that is basically an oven. Like, what are we doing here?
yeah,
And we had like talked about it for, she'd wanted to move here for a decade more, like 2 decades probably. And finally, when I started talking about it, we were like, really started, okay, let's think about this. How does it work? How can we get out there? Um, and we just ended up pulling the trigger one day. We were like, all right, most of our friends out there were just like, oh, this is your going away party. We were like, yep, see you later.
Well, let's kind of get, because we're hitting the hour mark. Like, you're settled now. You've been killing it, doing a lot of shows at galleries and museums. You've done everything from the Gene Autry to LA to like all over the Southwest. Like, what's on the horizon for you? What's your goal? And then maybe what's your like goal with motorcycles while you're in the Southwest as well? That's a lot.
Well, it's a lot. I'll try and work backwards. Goal motorcycle wise, just ride more.
Yeah.
LA was awful to ride in, not only for people, but like drivers not paying attention.
Oh, fuck yeah.
The roads are garbage. It's hot. It's not, entirely fun to ride in. Out here in New Mexico, it's just fucking gorgeous. The roads are amazing. There's still terrible drivers, but there's less of them. So there's that. So ride more. I don't have a build in mind at the moment. I don't really have the space yet, so I'm still like, putting my feelers out in that sense. I also got to bring that bank account back up so I could afford another fun project. Actually, the next project's my wife's bike. She's got a little CL 350 I'll get that thing running again and cleaned up and nice. So back to basics, I guess, for that. Manny, who was in this past issue as well, he has spoken to me a little bit about wanting to do a show. I don't want to, spill the beans on anything in case.
Oh, you get it set up on there. I'll fly.
Yeah. Oh, please. Yeah. Come out. It would be a lot of fun. And it would be the only thing I'll say is it would be on the Navajo Nation.
I'm there.
Yeah.
If I have to fly into Arizona or New Mexico, either way, I'm there.
You come to Santa Fe, we'll go out together. We'll take that ride. It's about 3 hours over to where he is. So he has an idea for like a show, maybe a ride. And if he wants to move on that, I want to help him out with that. I've already told him, like, whatever you need, let me know. I would love to help you out. So potentially helping out with a show that may be out here. Let's see. That's probably it motorcycle wise. For art stuff, I've got a museum show in Germany coming up in July, end of July, at the Otto Muller Museum. Looking forward to that. My wife and I may be flying out for that. We're not entirely sure yet, although it's June. We should figure it out soon.
Yeah.
I've got the next Indian market coming up in August. That's in Santa Fe. If you can make it out, anybody listening, come on out. It is unreal. It's amazing. The amount of art, not even like, you don't even have to look at my art. I would appreciate it if you did, but the amount of art that's out here, the talent of the art that shows up for Indian market, it's overwhelming. It really is. Like, you need to be prepared to be visually exhausted because dude, it's so good. I'm like blown away. The first year that I got in, I was blown away that I got in. I'm also like more of a contemporary native artist. I don't do, traditional beadwork. I don't do regalia. I don't do sand paintings. I don't do ledger art. I don't do like, if you were to Google.
I'm actually kind of shocked with the printmaking you do. You haven't kind of dipped your toe into ledger art.
All right. Here's why. Ledger paper's pricey now.
Oh,
you gotta go out, you gotta find it. And like the idea behind what ledger art was it was the only paper around that you could draw on.
Yeah.
And it was old ledger that had been handwritten, hotel ledgers, bank ledgers, whatever. So there was already stuff, and that was just floating around. You could grab it off the street. Nowadays, kind of the equivalent to that would be like the penny flyers or the grocery store ads that they put in your mailbox. So I have done some prints on that kind of stuff, and that's, I feel, is like a modern day version of ledger paper art. So I do have some of that, and I have like an idea for a broader series. I just haven't fully, started the gears moving for that one. I have some pieces over here that are in the works, but I need to sit down and really like flesh that idea out. So yes and no for the ledger art.
Yeah.
Um, what else is going on? I've been doing a lot of printing direct to garment.
Yeah.
So this cat out here, Stuart Colgate, he does Chimayo jackets, and he basically takes Chimayo rugs and cuts them into Valero coats, long coats, short, like mid waist coats, all sorts of coats. And he saw some of my artwork 2-3 years ago and was just like, I want that on a jacket. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Even though knowing it was was talking about an intaglio piece that I had done, which is where I scratch into plexiglass,
Yeah.
put ink into the scratch marks, and I can lift a print from that. The ink is soy based that I use, so would eventually wash out of anything.
Yeah.
And I knew this in the back of my head, but he asked, and I said, for sure, let's get something going. And he gave me 2 reams of fabric, both government issue. One was to the Navajo Nation, one was to the Hopi Nation. And he just said, print on them, and
Went
we'll
from
make
there.
coats. So I didn't do any intaglio on there, but I delved right back into block printing. I made a bunch of new blocks and just made some wild tapestries for him. Brought him out. He made he made 4 long coats and two short coats, 3 short coats. I don't know. We only have 2 long coats left. But made a quite a few jackets. Did pretty well with that, and people saw it and they saw the price tag and they were like, maybe you just print on my denim jacket. And even my wife was like, she bought me some clothes, was like, you should print on this. And I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. Like, don't tell me what to do. And now,
Now you're doing it.
later, yeah, now it's like shit. Should have been doing that forever ago. I mean, it's taken off. I just had a pop up at this store, J Justice, and just outside of the plaza over on Marcy Street. Not really my vibe of store, but JJ believes in me, believes in the work, and she can sell it. Most importantly, for me, I guess. And she loves it. Her clientele loves it. We had a big pop up. We did really well. We probably brought over 20 pieces or so. Half of it went. And we're going to be doing like, I kind of have a rolling thing with her. There's someone out in Pennsylvania that I'm doing custom dusters for, kind of, 1 or 2 a month now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be a whole nother thing on the East Coast that I do. I've been going out to Round Top, Texas. I'll probably be back out there in October. They do like Round Top is kind of known for antiquing and high end flea market is really what it is.
Artifacts.
Yeah. And the 550 market where I go, that's where Stuart goes. That's where Alan with Thunderbird Hats goes. I did some hats with him, some printed hats. They all invited me out. So I've been going there this will be my second time, second year. I'll be going back out there in October to do more printed stuff. Yeah, I got 2 dogs. Anybody walks by.
Yeah, I've had to mute a couple times because of my dog.
Oh, okay. My bad.
No, I don't care. It's just I'm trying not to spoil your thing.
I appreciate it.
Well, it just seems like you got an insane amount of stuff going on, and maybe I shouldn't keep you too long on the podcast, but it's been great talking to you, and maybe we should do a part 2 sometime.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah, I'm definitely busier than I've been in a while.
Yeah.
I mean, even with like the dice days, I was pretty busy then, but I got to a point where I could crank out that entire issue, in 2 weeks pretty much.
Yeah.
Which, that's kind of what allowed me to have all the free time for my own personal art and also, just the aesthetic of the magazine allowed me to really kind of focus. Not really focus, but like micro focus in a bunch of different areas. I could kind of just like play. Let me go play in this field for a little. Let me play in that field for a little bit. and kind of see what's there, see if there's a gem that I can take and bring into my own personal work. But yeah, since moving out to Santa Fe, it's just like I have been busy. It's
Right
good
on.
though.
Well, thanks for talking to Do You Even Chopper, where we
Oh hell yeah!
supposedly talk about choppers.
Yeah, we got a couple minutes in there for sure.
But well, I'll talk to you again soon.
Hell yeah, I appreciate it.
The Do You Even Chopper podcast is a product of The Ton Magazine. You can find us online at thetonmag.com. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Ton Mag, as well as YouTube. We are a quarterly print magazine based out of Olympia, Washington in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We focus mainly on choppers and chopper culture. We appreciate your support and thank you for listening.